And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Steel Curtain Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of SteelCurtain.com. And joining me, as always, is co-host and Steel Curtain contributor, Shayne Kubas. Shayne, we are in the thick of OTAs. We got another day here before this wraps up. We're not really gaining a ton of insight. There's been a few things we've written about so far, some weight changes, a couple video clips, that kind of stuff to be expected, right, this time of year. But the big news all surrounds players who aren't even on the Steelers yet or may not be. There's trade buzz surrounding Jonnu Smith. The Steelers have a meeting today with Gabe Davis, former Bills and Jaguars wide receiver. There's been some whispers around the Steelers with Kirk Cousins as a potential backup plan to Aaron Rodgers. And of course, Rodgers has not signed yet. So we're going to hit on all of those things today, Shayne, and I'm interested to get your thoughts. I certainly have plenty of opinions. I've written about it. I'm going to have a few articles coming out on this stuff today. So let's kick things off with the Aaron Rodgers waiting game here, Shayne. We talked about this last week. Still not signed by this point. We figured that was probably going to be the case, but now we're entering that dangerous territory where it's like, are we starting to get worried yet? Fans who want Rodgers to be here, part of this team, he really should have been here by now. And I think that both you and I agreed that like the June 10th minicamp date, it's got to be it by then. It's got to be it, and then we have to move on, right?
I still think so, yeah. If he's not here by then, it kind of becomes a situation where, again, like, what is the point of all this? Like, if you're not going to maximize, because voluntary OTA is like, again, we just mentioned it, you mentioned it a second ago, you're not getting a ton of like real work in. You're not doing a ton of like real practicing. It's more just to kind of get everybody together. Whoever shows up. You kind of you do what you can do in those moments. Once we get into mandatory camp, once that June 10th mini camp rolls around, that's when stuff starts to get more real. That's when you really start putting things together a little bit in terms of what do you want this team to look like, who you're looking at to try to make the team and how they're going to fit into the offense and defense. So that's when this stuff starts to matter more. If he can't figure out what he's doing by then, or if he isn't ready to make a decision by then, I think you have to either roll with Rudolph or you have to explore other options, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But that to me feels like the deadline of like, we really need to know. At least the Steelers need to know. We might not know exactly yet, but Steelers need to know his intentions by then if they don't.
Yeah, they call it mandatory for a reason. And obviously, Rodgers is not under contract. So anybody that was up in arms that he wasn't at OTAs, he's not on the team.
Until he signs, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
This guy has been very vocal about not liking the offseason programming. Like he kind of just wants to dive into it. And so would it shock me, Shayne, if he skips mandatory minicamp? I say skips, as again we said, he's not on the team, so
chooses not to sign until
not to sign until training camp rolls around, and that would make sense. Now maybe he's got some sort of verbal agreement with the Steelers. We don't know exactly what the conversations are that are taking place, but based on how he's been so vocal about not liking the offseason events of the NFL, I wouldn't put it past him, Shayne, to show up at training camp. Now, what does this do for a PR thing with your locker room? With Cam Hayward's there working his butt off at 36 years old, you would like to see your quarterback do the same if his intentions are to be with this team, right? But if you had to put a percentage on it right now, like what percent chance do you, just a guesstimate here, what percent chance do you think that Rodgers signs a contract with the Steelers before the start of mandatory minicamp on June 10th?
I'd probably say like 25%. Like, it just doesn't feel like this is happening soon. I think that for whatever reason, again, whether it is the personal stuff or whether it is him just truly not knowing what he wants to do yet, I don't think we're particularly close to this thing kind of being resolved. And for the Steelers, that's obviously an issue because you want this resolved as soon as possible so you know what direction you're heading in for this year, because that does change depending on who the quarterback is, obviously. How much it changes, you could debate that, but like it still does matter, right? If it's going to be Mason Rudolph, the expectations are different. If it's going to be someone else, they're also going to be different. Like that is going to matter. And I think for Rodgers, this whole thing, I wouldn't care as much if he was going into his third year with the team, right? As far as him not wanting to sign the training camp or not wanting to do the offseason program. Because if you're with the same team for a few years, you start to get into a rhythm of like, okay, I know what work I need to do. I know what things I need to work on. I know these players. Like, we can figure it out in training camp. I don't need to be here for all this stuff. That's not the case here. Like he needs all the time. He should want all the time he can get to kind of get acclimated to these guys and to the offense to maximize what's probably going to be his final season in the NFL if he plays. Like, to me, that's what I would want to do, and I know that's maybe not how he feels about it, but it just makes sense to want to do that. So it's getting to a point where I am wondering if it's going to happen at all.
Yeah, Shayne, and to me, it's almost more about the young guys on the team, right? Trying to develop that chemistry. Rodgers is obviously a very precise player.
Yeah, it's hard to play with him.
In the right place at the right time. He's all about timing. And so if Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin, these guys don't get a chance to work with him and they get off to a slow start because they don't have that chemistry, who is that on? Is it on the wide receiver? Is it on your quarterback who didn't show up until training camp or halfway through or whenever he comes here? But in terms of my percentage, I'll up you a little bit. I'll say 30%, though it feels unlikely. Just the whole direction that this is headed feels unlikely that he's going to be there. I do think, Shayne, ultimately, I think that Rodgers is still the quarterback, though I feel less confident about that than what I once did. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, in general, it's just, again, like 25%, 30%. We don't think it's likely, right? Like, that's kind of the
But what about overall? Like, is he going to be here, your week one starter? Like, do you still feel as confident as you did like before the draft?
I don't, not as confident. I think I'm putting it closer to a 50-50 because, again, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, right? He doesn't talk about it. The team isn't giving any specifics. We get the same thing of like, well, we think it's like we're confident, this and that. You can be confident all you want. You're not saying yes or no for a reason. Like, I don't think you know the answer. And if you don't know the answer and it's June, this has been going on for months now. Like, we know this as well as anybody, especially.
Yeah.
It's been going on for months. Like, if he doesn't know at this point, if I'm the Steelers, I almost don't really care what the answer is anymore, because if you're this far into the offseason, you still don't know if you want to play football, period, potentially. Why are we doing this then? Like, just do something else. But for both sides, like, he can decide to retire, or take a year off, or whatever he wants to do, handle whatever he's handling. Steelers go in a different direction for 2025. Like, that to me feels like honestly what should happen at this point. But they both seem to be in this weird tango still. So.
Yeah, and Shayne, I think that's a good segue into our next talking point here, which is Kirk Cousins has been labeled as a fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers by ESPN. Yeah. Now, we know Rodgers. We know what he would bring to the table potentially at this point. He's on the downtrend of his career. Still has got a pretty live arm overall. He doesn't have the mobility he used to. Cousins, on the other hand, Shayne, it's like, wow, you got paid a crap ton of money only to get benched last year late in the season. And there was a reason for that. He had 9 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He was ranked 17th in composite EPA, 49% success rate. Like, he just wasn't very good. And some people would chalk that up to say, well, he's a year removed from the Achilles. Well, guess what? So was Rodgers. And although the Jets did not have good results, he at least individually put up a lot better results than what Cousins did. I mean, Cousins was truly not good at all last year for the Falcons. And I think it's more than that, that he just had the Achilles, more than just being in a new situation. Like, his arm looked shot to me, and maybe a little bit further removed from that Achilles. Maybe you got to drive through your legs too when you're throwing the football. But if that doesn't come back, and this guy never had a big arm to begin with, we know that. Like, that was one of his downfalls. He's just a very mediocre arm talent. If that arm is gone, I want absolutely no part of this at all. And I've been vocal about that because despite Cousins being 5 years younger than Aaron Rodgers, he's 36 compared to a 41-year-old. Rodgers clearly is in a tier above Cousins when it comes to arm talent still.
Yes.
Do you agree with that assessment? And how would you feel if Cousins ended up being the backup plan for Pittsburgh?
I think it just comes down to what version of him you're getting. Because if you, like you said, if you get the version of him from last year, like the version that was benched because of poor play for Michael Penix Jr., like, he's not worth anything. Like, there's no trade value for him whatsoever. He's not even probably a great backup to have because, again, like you said, he didn't have the arm strength, and he also wasn't making good decisions, and his accuracy wasn't as good as it usually is. So, like, there's really no benefit to him being on really anyone's roster if he's that version of himself. Now, if you give me kind of the weird, like, few games in the middle of this, like, middle of the season where he was putting up good numbers and he was looking okay, then maybe we can talk. But I think it just comes down to how much of it was the Achilles, how much of it was some other injuries that apparently he had as well last season that maybe hindered him even more. I think it would come down to like a physical, right? Like for any trade, they're going to do a physical. If he passes a physical, it probably means he's at least going to be a back closer to the version of himself we saw when he got hurt. He was playing some of the best football of his career in 2023. So like, there's a reason to believe that if he can get 85, 90% of the way back to that after the Achilles, he would be the best player available at quarterback, even with Rodgers being in the mix. But it's just, you can't know right now. Like, unless he shows up to practices with the Falcons, which he's not going to, obviously, right now, and shows that he can still play and shows the arm looks better, you really have no way of knowing unless you try to trade for him and bring him in for a physical, which obviously brings its own issues. So to me, it's really hard to say where he's at. I think the best version of what he could be better than what Rodgers has left in the tank, but that's really asking a lot at this point based on what we saw last year.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I think that's you're assuming that some of that arm talent that we said wasn't that good to begin with comes back this season.
Farther
because if it doesn't,
stuff,
you can't play this guy. He can't throw to the sticks. He can't throw to the sidelines. Shayne, in his last game before he got benched, Cousins was 11 of 17, but for only 99 yards with 5.8 intended air yards per attempt and 6.7 yards per completion. And that was it. And so I just don't know. Like, some of those passes were so bad last year that with my freshly torn Achilles year or so removed, I could have driven on those balls and got an interception. I think it almost like some of them lofted out there so slow. It felt like if you're like if you were an athletic quarterback, you can go and catch your own pass type of stuff. Like it was rough. So I want to see how he looks. Like, honestly, if Cousins can put together a video of at least him throwing and trying to drive the ball, let me at least see what that looks like. Because if he doesn't get some of that back, what he had in Minnesota the previous few years, I don't want any part of that, because he might have the Skylar Thompson level arm at this point.
Right. There's just nothing left if that's the case. Yeah.
So those are our thoughts on Kirk Cousins. If you guys have thoughts on the matter, please drop them in our live chat here. If you have any questions for us, we'd love to get to those as well. And Shayne, I like Cousins. I think he's a cool guy. I think he's a wise quarterback. He typically makes good decisions with the football. To me, it just comes down to we know he doesn't have mobility. Like, he might be the least mobile quarterback remaining that's projected to be a starter in the NFL. If he gets traded, obviously he's not going to start on his current team. And if you've got a combination where you have zero mobility and you don't have the arm to drive the ball to the sidelines, that's really scary. And I don't know how far it's going to get you.
There's like one dude ever who's been able to make that work, and it was late career Peyton Manning, because he's Peyton Manning. That was about it. And that's only because of the best defense. He had crazy receivers, especially the 50 touchdown year. Like, it was different than what Cousins is going.
And it was the perfect storm. And obviously we're talking about probably the best all-time quarterback at making adjustments.
Yes, right. Being the offense by himself. Yeah.
He ran that offense. Those are our thoughts on Cousins. Shayne, I want to shift gears here and talk about one of the biggest storylines pertaining to the Steelers over the past few days here, and that is Gabe Davis, former Bills and Jags wide receiver. Obviously had some great moments in Buffalo, his third and fourth season with the Bills, combined for over 1,500 yards. Had a really big play on the Steelers. I think it sticks in everybody's mind. A 98-yard reception where he kind of mossed Minka there and then took it the rest of the way to the house. Don't get hung up on that, though, because his most recent sample, now I know he was dealing with injuries, the most recent sample wasn't very good. Shayne, with the Jaguars, he signed a 3-year, $39 million contract last offseason. The Jags wanted out of that deal. He failed his physical. They cut him 1 year later, despite spending that much money, and they're paying him $11.5 million not to be on the team this year. That's always telling when a team is willing to do that, especially a team that before drafting Travis Hunter, they needed wide receiver help. They were hoping that Gabe Davis would be that guy. Clearly, they didn't think that he would be. And so does that concern you at all? The fact that the Jags just got out of a massive deal and we're willing to eat dead money because of it and move on from him that quickly? I know that he just turned 26. Theoretically, he should be in the prime of his career, but he's coming off of by far his worst season. He played 10 games last year, and the results were not good. I want to share some of those numbers, but what are your overall thoughts on the Steelers' interest in Gabe Davis?
Well, if you ever heard of the term, and I'm sure you have, and I don't know who coined it. I've heard multiple people say it. Sacrificial X receiver. That's who Gabe
Okay.
Davis is at this point, I think. He is
Yeah.
the sacrificial X receiver. He's an X receiver in theory. Big, was fast, not sure how fast he is at this point, can theoretically make tough catches down the field. We've seen him do it in the past. That's kind of who Gabe Davis is at this point, in a best case scenario. And I guess the Steelers do kind of need that because DK, you do want to be able to free him up a little bit and at least like have someone out there that could run down the field and clear some stuff out for him. But realistically, this is a depth move that you hope becomes a starting caliber receiver again. The problem with Gabe Davis is like realistically, outside of a couple games and outside of a couple plays, he hasn't really been very good for any extended period of time in his career. You look at the Chiefs playoff game, where he scored like 4 touchdowns. Like obviously that stands out. He had one good year. I think it was a second season, maybe, or third. Outside of that, like it's been a lot of boom or bust with him, and I think that's fine if he's a street free agent because you're picking him up off of essentially the street because you got obviously cut, like you said, didn't work out with the Jaguars. That contract was never going to look good. I'm sorry, like I know the Jaguars do that. It worked out with Christian Kirk, didn't work out for Gabe Davis, but it's fine. They need this type of receiver now that they did trade Pickens away, like somebody who can at least be an X receiver out there and kind of do some of that stuff. But I don't think this is going to be some obviously needle moving thing if they do it.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, Shayne, how much of Gabe Davis's success was playing with Josh Allen?
It must have helped a little bit, I'm sure.
Being the guy that took the top off the defense, and it's not like he's got elite speed. I mean, this guy ran a 4.54, but you combine that with your size, and it's more of his ability to box out and win in traffic. So he does have some long speed. He's got some tools to work with there, but it's like, what is he going to offer your team really at this point? Especially, I mean, even if Rodgers, whether he's here or not, what does he offer your team opposite DK Metcalf? Is it a noticeable improvement from what we've seen in recent years? And Shayne, for whatever reason, the Steelers seem to be infatuated with the idea of getting a free agent wide receiver coming off a bad season who's big and who can block, at least on paper. That's the profile they've looked for. They did it with Allen Robinson. They did it with Van Jefferson. They even did it with Mike Williams in the trade last year. Now they're attempting to do it with Gabe Davis. That concerns me because Davis has hit an all-time low right now, and I'm truly not a believer in his skill set. I don't love receivers that can't separate. It's as simple as that. And unless you've got Josh Allen buying time, 4 or 5 seconds, extending the play and whipping the ball down the field, like I just don't know if he's that good. I really don't. I've got to share some statistics with you, Shayne. I dug up on Gabe Davis just the other day. These are his numbers from the 2024 season. So over 10 games with the Jaguars, 239 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. But the efficiency is where it gets scary. 47.6% catch rate, a 40.5% success rate, which is really, really low for a wide receiver. 5.7 yards per attempt when targeted. Again, that is, it doesn't get much worse than that for a per season number. 2.0 yards after the catch per reception. Quarterbacks had, and I know it was Mac Jones partially here too, Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence, but they combined for a 61.5 passer rating when targeting Gabe Davis last year. This all equated to a 52.5 PFF grade overall, ranking him 127th out of 133 qualifying wide receivers in the NFL last year. Now, I've had people ripping on me already saying, well, it was because of injuries. It's because of injuries. I understand that you can attribute some of this to injuries. Some of it, though, it's hard to say because he was in a new situation. And when he was healthy, still wasn't doing anything. And so it makes me wonder how much of it was the Josh Allen factor in Buffalo. So, Shayne, what do you make of those numbers that I just threw out there right now? Is that concerning to you at all?
Yeah, because again, like I think what we know with Gabe Davis at this point is I think he's a fine player. And when a fine player is banged up and in a bad offense, they're not probably going to be very good. Like, I mean, sometimes it's that easy to just break it down, right? Like he's a fine player. Probably someone when fully healthy on a good offense could be a part of it, the third or fourth option, something like that, maybe. But he's not a difference maker. He wasn't really even in Buffalo at most points in his career there, right? There was games, like I said, moments, but it wasn't a consistent thing. he's an X receiver that you can throw out there and play with. That's kind of what his mold is. And I think for the Steelers, that's fine because they don't really have that in the chamber right now outside of a DK Metcalf, right? Like they don't really have someone with that profile. So if they ultimately sign him, if he passes physical, if he's healthy, all that stuff, he'll have a role. He'll probably be a better version of this archetype that they've been trying to do because he is younger, should theoretically have more juice left. Like all that's fine. It's not going to solve the ultimate problem of who is the other receiver in this offense. Like he's probably not going to be that guy. You hope it's someone else, specifically Roman Wilson, who I'm sure we'll talk more about as the offseason goes along. But realistically, he's just going to be a piece of the offense if he signs, and probably not a very big one.
Yeah, Shane, I agree with that assessment. I think that Gabe Davis is a solid football player, but I kind of view him as a really low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. Is that what you're really aiming for here? Now, again, the reports are that Gabe Davis can sign for veteran minimum. If that's the case,
because of the way his contract
that's
is,
fine. Yeah, that's fine. But even then, Shane, I would push back a little bit and say, if signing Gabe Davis ushers in the Van Jefferson effect, where you can't develop Calvin Austin or Roman Wilson because you've got a guy there that you brought in to block and be the receiver opposite your number 1, then do we really want him even for the veteran minimum? Like, I think there's an argument there, at least. Now, if you carry him through camp, see how things go, whatever. But I want to give another example of a wide receiver who was good early on in his career and then fell off the face of the earth. This happens sometimes. Chase Claypool did with the Steelers. When he was playing here and with Ben Roethlisberger, he was on a really good career trajectory those first 2 seasons, gets traded to Chicago, falls off the face of the earth in Chicago, Miami, Buffalo, hasn't done a thing. I know he had the injury in Buffalo, but didn't do anything with the previous 3 teams that he's been on. And it's like, could Gabe Davis be some variation of that guy? And similar in a sense where they're the big-bodied wide receivers who maybe are just very, very average football players that kind of get surpassed on the depth chart. And even watching Gabe Davis, all the games that I watched of him in Buffalo, I never thought like, oh, this is a guy that they need to pay. Like it's right. I never had that feeling about him at all. And if you don't feel that way about a wide receiver, it probably shows that you want to upgrade that spot. And so I think that's partially why the Bills were okay just letting him walk. I've got mixed feelings on this, even if he signs for the veteran minimum, just because Shayne, I'm more forward thinking than the organization. Clearly,
yes. I would say most people on the planet are, but
and it's not that Gabe Davis is old, but it's like, all right, you just totally don't believe in Roman Wilson at all then? Because this is the guy you spent a 3rd round pick on. Theoretically, if Roman Wilson does turn out, he's a receiver that I kind of like the profile better of because he's so much quicker, faster, more explosive that if he's able to play on the outside at all, or even if he just plays in the slot, but sees more opportunity, like that intrigues me more. And I think ultimately what's going to happen is it's going to be like, all right, because Arthur Smith wants to run these big jumbo packages, these so much 12, 21 personnel, whatever you want to do, 13 personnel, like what's going to end up happening is you're going to see obviously DK out there all the time. You're going to see him paired with Gabe Davis. And then the slot opportunities are all going to be mixed with a jumble of players like Freiermuth and Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin. Like, if you don't have any hope for Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin, that's one thing. If you do, why stunt their development even another year here? And again, Calvin Austin probably won't be a big, bright part of the future at this stage of his career. We know he's going into year 4. He would have shown probably more by now, albeit it's been at the mercy of some questionable offensive play calling. Roman Wilson, though, has played 5 NFL snaps. We'd like to see what the guy has, rather than just passing the torch to Gabe Davis, who was quite frankly, one of the worst wide receivers in the NFL when he was on the field last year.
Yeah, I think the problem is like this shouldn't really be a problem if they it shouldn't be a problem if they sign him because him and Wilson, especially Wilson, wouldn't serve the same role. But in an offense like this, like you said, where clearly they want to, we'll talk about how clear it is they want to be in big packages in a second here. They want to, right? They want to be in condensed formations. They want to be in 2 receiver packages a lot of the time. Gabe Davis fits that role better if he's on the team as both blocker and just as a size guy there. Like realistically, Wilson isn't going to get a lot of those snaps most likely. And you could argue he probably shouldn't if that's the type of offense they want to run. But why draft him in the 3rd round if you don't plan on using him at some point pretty frequently? Even if it is as a slot receiver, then you have to be in a position to use him as a slot receiver, which they don't really want to live in like 11 personnel very often. So
Yeah.
it does just become this whole thing of like, what is actually the goal of this offense? Like, how do you want to use these players? Because right now, if they want to be in that big package most of the time, yeah, they don't really have a good second receiver to fill that role outside of DK right now. So getting a Gabe Davis makes sense for that. But like you said, does that ultimately hurt you more than it helps you because you're not getting these younger guys on the field who still have the potential to be something? Whereas Davis, we kind of know who he is at this point.
Yeah, Shane, if it was up to Arthur Smith, give him 4 tight ends out there at all times.
He might get his wish.
He'll try to find a way to make it where he's gonna run the crap out of the ball no matter what, at least try to. But I mean, it's not surprising to see the interest in him because of Arthur Smith's history in Tennessee, in Atlanta, having big wide receiver 2s opposite his wide receiver 1 who were also big. I mean, he had A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. He had Drake London and a committee of big receivers next to him, as well as a collection of tight ends everywhere he's gone to. So it's not surprising to see the interest in Gabe Davis. And so how I would answer this question, should the Steelers sign Gabe Davis? I would be okay for signing him on the cheap, preferably the veteran minimum contract.
It's what it'll be, I think, if they do.
But with the idea that I'm still going to give Roman Wilson every opportunity to win that wide receiver 2 job. I drafted this guy in the 3rd round. He was high on the consensus board. It was a value pick compared to where Steelers were drafting him. I know that he essentially had to redshirt that rookie season, but he's the younger guy with 3 years left on his rookie deal and a guy who profiles as someone who should be able to create more space. And is obviously was very sure-handed too, had the lowest drop rates in college football when the Steelers drafted him. So that's the guy I'm more intrigued by what Roman Wilson can be rather than having 5 years of Gabe Davis and being afraid that I already know how this guy is. And by the way, Van Jefferson wasn't old when the Steelers signed him.
Yeah,
he was just not very good.
just
so,
bad.
And you obviously you hope that Gabe Davis is better than that. And I think that he would be.
Probably.
I just don't know how much. I just don't know how much. It just feels like all these guys are kind of in the same mold that they've been targeting for that wide receiver 2 spot, and it's never enough.
Yeah. I think if he had a full, like a lane of, or like full green in front of him, green grass at him, he would be able to finish a run. Unlike, unfortunately, Van Jefferson could not do last year for whatever reason. So, yeah, I think he could at least do that. But
not at all. And in terms of, I mean, you're looking at raw production and efficiency. Van Jefferson was actually quite comparable to what Gabe Davis was last year, albeit a different sample. Davis's injuries. Again, I do think that Davis would be better than Jefferson, Mike Williams, Allen Robinson.
Yeah.
But you talk about a low bar of has-been veterans there. Like is he the next has-been veteran to join the Steelers? Like that's my concern. It's like you're following the same trend of the same profile player over and over again and expecting to get different results. I'm just not convinced that you will.
I tend to agree there. Yeah.
All right. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. Shane, on to the Jonnu Smith trade buzz here. Yeah. This one caught me off guard a little bit. And I think it should have caught everybody off guard. If you know the Steelers want a playmaker, you know they could use another pass catcher, but another tight end? Like the Steelers last offseason handed Pat Freiermuth a 4-year, $48 million contract extension, making him the 9th highest paid tight end in the NFL. The year before that, they drafted Darnell Washington in the 3rd round, which again was considered a really good consensus board pick, a value pick. And the Steelers, I think, have gotten everything out of Washington they would have wanted to from a inline blocking tight end. He fits the bill. I mean, and I think the two complement each other very well. There's only so many targets to go around in Arthur Smith offense. When Freiermuth was targeted, I thought he was relatively efficient. I think he still had a quality season, just had his 3rd season of 60-plus catches. He can do a lot of that for you. He's already the F tight end. He's already the guy who operates best from the slot, much like Jonnu Smith. You're going to have some clear and obvious overlap here if you traded for Arthur Smith, unless you're sending Freiermuth back the other direction. And what sense does it make to do something like this? And perhaps my biggest holdup, Shane, is like, all right, it's one thing if Rodgers signs today and you are confident this is your quarterback, then by all means, if you want to take that stab right now to try to give your offense a little bit of a boost, go ahead and trade for a 30-year-old tight end. But if you're trading for a 30-year-old tight end and Mason Rudolph is your quarterback and you're going to have probably a dud season in the middle of the pack here somewhere, why do it? Why give away any draft pick, even if it's a day 3 draft choice, to crowd your tight end room and to make it so you've got less capital to work with in the future. You've got another contract to worry about. Jonnu Smith wants a new deal. It's part of the reason why Miami is open to trading him. Are you going to invest that much money in your tight end room? Like, if that's the case, I'd rather just have one bona fide elite tight end rather than parsing my money out to 3 different guys to try to combine them to be one great player. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me, Shayne.
Yeah, so a lot of it doesn't make sense. Now, I will say personally, I am very much of a, I love my tight ends, okay? Maybe don't clip that, what I just said. But the point is, you really need to, if you're an offense that doesn't have a lot going for you, right, lean into something, right? And I think this is what it would be if they made this move, is lean into the fact that, okay, we have one receiver we know a lot about, and he's great and everything like that, but we don't know a whole lot else. But what I do know is Arthur Smith knows how to use guys like this. You know how? Because he did it with this player, maybe to the detriment of his team in some ways when he was with the Falcons, but very much not to the detriment when he was with the Titans, right? Like, this is a guy that he knows, he's familiar with. And I think even though he is in the Freiermuth mold in terms of, he's not a blocker by any means, he is that move tight end, he is an even better version of a true, flex tight end, guy you can play in the slot, even step outside a little bit. I think that they could coexist for some period of time. Now, yeah, if you're going to pay all of them, as they've already paid Pat, they're going to have to pay Smith. If they want to make it worth it, they're going to have to pay Washington at some point. Yes, it's a lot of money for a tight end room. But if that's what you want the offense to be, if you want to lean into that, I think there's a way to get them all to work together in some way. They need more explosiveness. Jonnu Smith is still explosive. He was probably the best part of Miami's offense for large chunks of last year. He had a career year in terms of receiving yards, and I think touchdowns possibly too. I have to double check that.
Yeah, 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, he was super productive. The problem is not Jonnu Smith as a player. That's the biggest thing, I think, for anyone who's being oh, why wouldn't you want to, nothing to do with him as a player. It's not that at all. It is, like you said, is it too much of one thing? And I think you could certainly argue that. But outside of Roman Wilson, who you hope is good, and DK Metcalf, obviously, would Jonnu Smith not be the best playmaker you can add right now that is technically available that we know of? Probably. This team needs more playmaking. Yeah. It comes down to yes, it would be weird, but I think for the Steelers, you might have to lean into the weird if you want to be better on offense, because the clear path isn't there right now. The weird path could be your best shot at making this thing kind of work in 2025. So.
And maybe that's it, Shayne. And I don't think you're wrong in terms of giving the offense a boost. You're definitely not wrong to say maybe they should lean into going tight end heavy. Heck, that's what Arthur Smith likes to do.
He wants to do
it's what he's known for. The problem that I have, Shayne, is if your team isn't ready to compete in the playoffs, or certainly not for a Super Bowl right now, should you be trading for a 30-year-old tight end when your tight end room is pretty solid and you have investments there right now? And so that's where I have the issue. It's can I get all 3 of these guys? Are you going to really run 13 personnel all game long? And what do? You're going to play. Is it most effective for your offense to have 2 tight ends working the slot instead of a slot receiver with 4.39 speed in Roman Wilson's case, or 4.2 speed in 4.32 speed in Calvin Austin's case? Are you going to get more explosion out of that? Now, you said it. Jonnu Smith is a good player, and he's coming off a fantastic season. 88 catches, over 800 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I mean, that is as good a production as you can expect from anybody not named Travis Kelce.
Pretty much.
So
McBride now.
Yeah. And so the problem, though, Shayne, is it comes down to these windows, right? If you're trying to capitalize on this window, I understand. But my goodness, if you're doing that, you better have Aaron Rodgers coming here, because you're not going to go very far probably still with Mason Rudolph. And so Jonnu Smith, I really like as a player. I think he's been a good player his whole career and is coming off of his best season. Maybe he still has a few seasons left in the tank. My focus, however, Shayne, would be more towards looking at the future rather than just trying to, kind of have that naive belief that you're going to make a splash right now. And I think the outlook is very clear. I just don't think that it's very possible. Now, going back to Arthur Smith, Shayne, what was really interesting is I think he kind of messed up Kyle Pitts in a way. Kyle Pitts had that Pro Bowl rookie season with the Falcons. Arthur Smith goes and signs as the head coach, and then Pitts you don't hear from him the last 3 years. Some of that's injury related. He did too. I looked at his splits, Shayne, and I actually have an article up on this on stillcurtain.com. You can go check it out. But Kyle Pitts, during his first season, played a lot of outside wide receiver. In fact, that's where he lined up most. Anyway, that's essentially what he was. You watch him in Florida, he was a glorified wide receiver. But Arthur Smith didn't like that, apparently, and he tried to take a way more balanced approach. Had him as the inline Y tight end, did some more F tight end with him, and his production on the outside and his snap usage on the outside went increasingly down under Arthur Smith. That resulted in play that you're not utilizing him to his talents. And so does he know how to utilize his guys best? Because ironically, Shayne, again, Jonnu Smith leaves Arthur Smith and has a career season. And Jonnu Smith is a guy who spent 5 years with Arthur Smith as the play caller for him. Yep. And what happens as soon as he leaves the Arthur Smith train, he has the best season of his career at almost 30 years old. And so it makes me wonder, like, Arthur Smith, are you that good when it comes to evaluating and using your tight ends? Because I just gave you fired off two examples of how two tight ends were utilized better when they weren't with Arthur Smith.
I think the sad part is, and I don't want to like crush you here, Tom, but the sad part is the 2021 rookie season for Pitts was with Arthur Smith as his head coach. So he knew he used him as but then decided to stop doing that. Like, that's the sad part.
Was his. Okay, so that was.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, that makes it even worse, though.
Injured the next year. Yes.
Yeah, it makes it even worse because then he stopped using him that way after his rookie season, where it's like you literally got 1,000 yards out of the guy
and you know what he could be. Like, you saw the glimpses of what he could be, and you still didn't.
So. And that honestly makes it even worse in some ways, where it's like, okay, you used him this way. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you didn't use him.
A Pro Bowl season, 1,000 yards.
Yeah,
and so,
as a rookie tight end.
Yeah.
So it's weird, but I do think you're fair to wonder, like, getting Jonnu Smith is already kind of a weird thing to do if you're the Steelers, but then doing it with Arthur Smith, despite his clear affinity for him, might not be the best thing for him or anyone really involved, is the sad part of it. So I don't know. It's really tough, but like this offense just lacks playmaking so bad that, like, if they traded something like not super consequential for him and gave him like a decent 2-year deal or something like that, there's worse things they can do. And at this point, I'm kind of just like, if they do something that isn't Gabe Davis, I'm probably gonna be like, all right, that's fine. Like, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
So here's the next dilemma, Shayne. I want to push it forward because both you and I agree that Jonnu Smith is a good football player and is playing his best football. We do think that he would improve the Steelers offense. But let's talk about the compensation here. You're going to give up a day 3 pick. We don't know what that is so far. Maybe it's a 4th rounder. Like, some people are saying 5th, 6th. I don't know if the Dolphins, what incentive would the Dolphins have to be willing to part with him for that little of draft capital when he's coming off a really good season, was one of their best offense players. Their only Pro Bowler on their entire roster last year. Shayne, for what it's worth, let me fire off their other options at tight end real quick before I get too deep in the weeds here. Julian Hill ranked 74th out of 74 tight ends last year from Pro Football Focus, a 37.2 grade on 515 snaps. Tanner Connor, a 49 grade. Pharaoh Brown, a 45.6 grade. Jonnu Smith, a 78.2 grade, 5th among all tight ends, and an 84 receiving grade.
Yeah.
What incentive do they have? And Mike McDaniel's trying to keep his job here at this point. Like, this guy is considered a head coach on the hot seat. Jonnu Smith is coming off a great year. You know that he can be a weapon, almost a 90 catch player for you. Why trade him? You have nothing behind him of any significance, any note. Why trade him for a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick?
Honestly, my best answer to that is the Dolphins are a weird team who does weird stuff. The problem with the Dolphins at this point is they kind of have built, and you could argue this for the last like 4 years of them. They've built an offensive infrastructure that when it works, there's really nothing anybody can do about it. But when it doesn't work, it works. It doesn't work worse than just about any offense does. Like, when it hits a wall, it really hits a wall hard. So they're in this very precarious situation all the time where it's like, okay, well, this week we're playing a team that simply just can't run with our guys, so they're just not going to be able to like do anything to us, right? And then you get into a situation where, okay, now they can run with the receivers. What do we do? Well, last year, what we do is throw the Jonnu Smith, and it worked kind of. It just, the team was bad, so it didn't really matter that much. But like, you're right to wonder, like, what would be the upside of trading a guy that, maybe you don't end up paying him, right? Maybe you decide you're like, hey, we want you to just play out your contract. You can do what you want to do, whatever. That's still valuable next year because, like you said, this team needs to at least put up a good effort next year for these guys to keep their jobs. you'd imagine he's going to help them do that if he's on the team. So unless you're getting something of real value back, which like a 4th round pick, I think is close enough to real value where it's like, all right, I get it for an expiring contract. But yeah, they'd probably be better off obviously having him than not having him, unless they have some sort of, other option that they think is going to be good enough, which based on the roster right now, I don't think is there. So it's a very interesting situation. If this just comes down to him not wanting to play for them because he wants to get paid, so be it. Maybe then it's just they want to get rid of the headache if he's going to be a headache, but I don't really know if that's the case.
Yeah, and Jonnu Smith, he obviously wants a new contract. The Dolphins aren't in a great financial state, but
They're not.
We know how these contracts where you can push money into the future. You can make it work easily. They've got over $13 million in cap space right now, which is not a lot to head into the season with. Next year, it looks like they're going to be in the hole, and that might be part of it is why, because they're already going to have some cuts and restructures probably. So I understand from the financial side from the Dolphins. That's the only way on their end that it makes sense because they don't have a proven option. They don't have a good option at all outside of Jonnu Smith. Let's flip the coin here and look at it from the Steelers side of things, though. Yes, it would improve their offense like we talked about, at least a little bit. Although I do think you'd be cutting into Freiermuth's production. There's no doubt about that. I don't think that Freiermuth can have the 60, 65 catch season if Jonnu Smith is there, which is okay. If it makes your offense better, that's fine. We talked about draft capital. You're going to give up a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick, something in that mold there, whatever they want, maybe a 5th or 6th rounder. You might not be able to get the 4th for a guy who needs a new contract and is 30 years old. But Shayne, just talk about their finances. Like Freiermuth is costing the team over $10 million a season. Darnell Washington is on a 3rd round rookie contract, which is still a respectable salary. Do you have any intentions of signing him after next year? Because he will be entering his 4th season after this year. And so you would like to think that maybe you can get your Y tight end locked up long-term. He is a very young guy. He was 21-year-old rookie for the Steelers. He obviously has the body type that is unmatched in the NFL by anyone not named Mercedes Lewis, who's playing at 40 years old still. So can he go that long? Can he be that Y blocker for them? Those are 2 factors right there. But Shayne, if I turn around and I give Jonnu Smith a contract, just based off what players are getting right now at the tight end position, you can even use Freiermuth's contract as a baseline, right? And say $10 million for Freiermuth. Jonnu Smith just had a Pro Bowl season, which you never had, significantly more productive than you. Yes, you are a little bit younger, and so that factors into it there. But even let's just call it another $10 million per year for another 4-year contract. You're paying like $22 million a season for tight ends. And that's not to get an elite tight end. It's to get 2 good tight ends and a good blocking tight end like that. Is that a good use of investments overall? Because I don't think Jonnu Smith can play actual wide receiver.
He did a little. I mean, he played a decent amount of snaps.
He played. I'll give you his out wide snaps. Like I got those.
Yeah, it was a more than it probably should be if you're being honest about it. But it did exist to some.
Yeah, so he had 148 snaps out wide. 198 as an inline tight end and 254 from the slot. So still vast majority from the slot. A more split outside than what Freiermuth had. Right. But surprise, I think the Kyle Pitts number was like 331 out wide as a rookie. It was really high. So he's still his 3rd most usage is on the outside of the formation. Can you actually expect him to do that to the point where it's like I can get all 3 guys on the field at the same time? And is he most effective there? That's my question, because I think he's definitely most effective from the slot still.
Right, of course. And I think that's where he should play most of the time if he's going to play. You can line him up in the backfield a little bit too. It was like a fullback, H-back thing. He did that in his career with the Titans a lot. So like you can get them all on the field. Again, the question becomes ultimately, if you get them all on the field, is that actually the best offense for you? Or is it just we're going to do this because it's weird and might gimmick our way through the season, right? And I think, unfortunately, for the Steelers, like your best chance of fielding a good offense is probably gimmicking it a little bit because you just don't have the horses right now to really field like a competent, balanced offense, right? I think the run game could be very good. Like we talked about that. I think that has the potential to be very good. The passing game, especially if it isn't Rodgers back there, like you're really climbing up. It's an uphill battle, let me put it that way, for it to be a competent passing offense. Maybe getting weird with it is your best option to do that. But again, for 2025, it probably isn't going to make the difference anyway. I still would be against like giving up legitimate capital for Smith, but it would be probably more interesting to watch every week than if we don't do it. So maybe there's something
Shayne,
to that.
Going back to the finances here for a second, would you be okay paying $20 to $22 million a year for your tight end room? And just for reference here, as what the top tight ends in the NFL are earning right now, George Kittle, 19 a year, McBride, 19 a year, which again, these contracts are going way up there. So you can certainly argue that having the combination of Jonnu, Freiermuth, Darnell Washington is better than that. Travis Kelce's getting 17 million a year, Hawkinson at 16, Mark Andrews at 14. Like, if the Steelers are paying 22 million, but you can't just combine all their talents into one superstar. Like, they're still going to have, they each have their limitations. Like Jonnu Smith isn't that big. He's 6'3", 248. He's only going to be an average blocker, though he's a willing blocker. He doesn't have a huge size advantage against linebackers. And so Freiermuth is just not a very good blocker. It's just that's the way he is. He's not going to change at this stage of his career. Darnell Washington is stiff-hipped and is not going to get open as easily as some of the other guys. And so each of these guys
look better recently. If you saw, I'm sure you saw. It does look a little lighter, so maybe there's a little bit more to it.
There are reports that Washington is playing 15 to 20 pounds lighter, which
Alfredo could still be 285
pounds. He was 300 pounds last year was the report. So yeah, it's still a huge tight end. But you understand what I'm saying, right? Like, because by getting a third tight end on the field, you are taking more explosion off the field by taking a wide receiver off of the field. And so are you okay with that trade-off for knowing that you're going to have to give up draft capital and turn around and pay him $10 to $12 million a season? That's where it ultimately comes to question.
Okay with it. It's a little too rich for me to be okay with it per se. Now, again, do I think it could theoretically work? Sure. But I would rather be like a rental just to make the 2025 season more interesting. But then it's like, does he want to do that? Is he going to be involved, like super involved? If he, granted, he would be playing for a contract in the offseason, so he'd probably still be playing hard. But like, it would have to be kind of that. Like, I don't know if I want to invest that much into that particular group of tight ends. Now, again, if you're going to make the tight ends the offense, like if that's how you want to run your team, I'm okay with paying, X amount for that if it's what your identity is, because then it doesn't really matter. As long as it's working, you can pay them whatever you need to pay them. I don't necessarily think that trio is going to be like something you want to run the offense through necessarily. I think you just want them to be a part of it. So overall, I think for a rental for the season to make it a little bit more interesting, I'd be down with it. Paying him on top of that, which is obviously what he'd want if he's going to get traded, not so much there.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like, all right, why didn't you just sign him last year when the price point would have been a little bit cheaper? He hit free agency.
Well, he had to have Michael Pruitt.
I'm shaking my head for those audio listeners right now. It's like, yes, and Van Jefferson, by the way. You had to have Michael Pruitt and Van Jefferson because they made a world of difference on your football team last year. And how could you live without those guys? So it is frustrating. It's in some ways just to see. I don't know. I wouldn't say. If you're okay, Shayne, let me ask you this. If you're Omar Khan, Andy Weidel, you're the heads of the front office, are you giving Arthur Smith this much control to say, hey, go ahead and spend our money the way that you want to because you want another tight end? Like, I understand trying to appease your coordinators. I get that. But do you let them like kind of run your front office in a way and make these moves for you?
So the problem right off the bat is I just wouldn't have hired Arthur Smith to be my offensive coordinator. So we're already behind the 8 ball there. But once I do, I'm certainly not taking his consideration into it very much outside of like, I want to know what type of player you think you can work with best to try to make this offense as good as possible. How we get those players is certainly up to me and Andy in this case. But I will take, obviously you want to work with your coaching staff. You want to make sure you're getting players that they're interested in coaching, ideally that are talented enough to get done what they're trying to accomplish and will fit into the system as well as possible. Obviously, the best coaches make the players fit into their system or change the system to make the players fit. Like we know that about the best coaches. They're going to make stuff work if they have to. You look at some of the best offensive minds and how they've developed and changed things over time with the McVays and the Shanahans of the world. Like they're the best at that. Arthur Smith clearly isn't that type of coach, so he is looking for very specific players, and that's okay, but you can't dictate that to the front office. Like you have to work with what you're given, and you hope that they work together to some level, but he should not be his opinion shouldn't be swaying a move like this, right? Where you're giving up draft capital and you're probably paying a guy $10+ million a year.
Well, Shayne, I think maybe where we are right now is the Steelers, Art Rooney included, needs to see that Arthur Smith is the guy who can lead this offense, right? I know you gave him that 3-year contract, but he's entering the second season of that. The Steelers finished 20th in composite EPA last year. They averaged 14 points per game over the final 5 games, including the playoff loss to the Ravens. You need to see that this is a guy who can get you to where you want to go. And I think part of that is maybe appeasing him by getting him a piece that he's banging the table for, saying, I can make it work if I've got the right pieces. I guess if that's the case and it costs you a day 3 pick, you want to try it out, whatever. My whole thing, again, it's not about Jonnu. I think that Jonnu is a good football player. It's about, do I think the Steelers are in a window where they should be trading for 30-plus-year-old players right now? And the answer is a resounding no. Like, especially since you've already traded away George Pickens. Like, you obviously, you cared more about getting the locker room back in order than you did about competing this year. You showed it with that decision. And not that I disagree with it. I think it's important to have a stable locker room and all your players on the same page. But the fact that you did that, knowing that Pickens was far and away better than any other wide receiver 2 option that you could possibly have on your team, then you did that knowing that you're going to take a hit for it. So you can't have your feet in both doorways. You can't say, I'm going to be competitive and I'm going to look towards the future. Like, you just can't do that. You need to pick a direction. And Shayne, that has been our biggest beef with this team since the beginning of the offseason. What direction are you heading right now?
It's so funny with the Steelers, because you're right. Like, trying to do both is very, one, hard, and 2, very likely to not succeed, right? But it's so funny with the Steelers because we've been asking them to think about the future for years, and then they finally do it, sort of, but then they still can't let go of, like, the idea of, like, so they're going to just do a worse version, honestly, of what they were doing, where, like, they're not even fully going for it because they don't want to completely compromise the future, but they're not willing to just kind of eat their vegetables in 2025 and say, well, we're just going to work with what we got and we'll see what happens. Like, they're probably going to make some sort of move. Now, again, if it's a small move, like this ultimately could be a small move if it's only like a 5th or 6th round pick, which, again, for the Dolphins, I wouldn't understand. But hey, if you can get it, you can get it. And if it's like a rental, then fine. It doesn't really matter that much then in that situation. Mm-hmm. But if it's the scenario that we kind of laid out, where it's like it's probably maybe a 4th round pick, then you pay him for a few years, it just, I don't really know what the point of that is at this point. So,
Shayne, I want to toss one more thing out to you because I think we beat this Jonnu Smith thing enough. If you want to read more about our thoughts, multiple contributors in Steel Curtain have shared their thoughts on what they believe the Steelers should do in this situation. But I want to throw one more thing out here. A former Arthur Smith player that we just talked about and a former Jonnu Smith teammate who kind of overshadowed him a bit, Kyle Pitts, has been in the news cycle, and there are teams that have reportedly reached out to see about a trade for Kyle Pitts. We don't know if the Steelers are one of them, but based on their interest in former Arthur Smith players and the fact that they're interested in trading for Jonnu Smith, maybe the Steelers were one of those teams. Shayne, we talked about Pitts' usage as a rookie being used as an outside receiver where he earned 1,000 yards in route to a Pro Bowl season. He's dealt with injuries. I want to be very clear. He's struggled these past couple of seasons. High drop rates, low efficiency rates. But I think part of that, Shayne, I really do think part of it has to be his usage, playing Y tight end, playing from the slot more where he's more comfortable, just as like an oversized receiver on the outside. If you put him in that role, there is some intrigue here. I truly think there is, because he is such a talented profile in terms of size, speed, downfield ability. Could he be a wide receiver 2 for you? Could he potentially be that guy who plays some outside receiver for you, who plays some slot? I'm not going to make him do the things that he's not comfortable doing at this stage of his career. I'm just going to play him where he's good. Outside receiver and some slot. Would you be intrigued by that enough to maybe say trade for a Kyle Pitts?
I think I would, more so than Smith, because there is at least the idea and the potential of like upside, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So we know what Smith is, and that's a good player who should be worth something to a team that can use him effectively. Probably should still just be the Dolphins, but whatever. Pitts does present kind of like an opportunity to see if you can rework what he is as a player, like you said, make him more of technically a receiver only, and really kind of view him in that way. And especially for an offense that wants to be in a lot of condensed formations, wants to be in those situations, that is where he could be valuable as a blocker, where he's not going to be a blocker as a tight end, not a true one, but he's a big body guy. Like he could probably, if the effort's there, which it's been a problem with him as well with the Falcons, he could be very good in that role and then still play outside receiver at times. I think the problem with Pitts at this point is I do wonder, like, is the effort going to be there? How much does he really want to put into this at this point? There's been questions of that with him, with the Falcons. Now, he still has flashes. Like, you look at the end of last year when Penix got in there, he definitely looked a little bit more kind of energized. And, granted, Kirk Cousins wasn't exactly bringing a lot of energy to the organization for a lot of the season, but he did seem a little bit more energized. So maybe there is something there with him. But I feel the Falcons kind of the same way with the Dolphins. Like, is there upside to trade him right now? Because his value is just not going to be there. Like, I would, if you're going to move on from him, I would maybe want to see if he can kind of get things going up to the deadline this year with Penix and a quarterback. And then if you're not super sold on wanting him long term, then you can maybe look at trading him. But right now, I still think the value would be very good for them.
Yeah, and I think that could be part of the issue. That could be part of the holdup there. Shayne, I would go as far to say that if Kyle Pitts had started his NFL career as just a wide receiver, he'd be better right now.
Probably.
He's not a good blocker, but what he is a tremendous athlete with an unmatched size profile. He entered the NFL. This is his NFL official combine numbers: 6'5" and 5'8", 245, and 83 and 3/8 wingspan, which is 98th percentile. He ran, and then at his pro day, he ran a 4.44 40-yard dash with a 129-inch broad jump, 97th percentile. This guy is fast. He's explosive. He can win down the field. And I do have his splits right here. As a rookie, the best season we talked about, he graded out as the 5th best tight end in the NFL with an 80 grade. He played 237 snaps out wide, 286 from the slot, and 248 in line. Compared that to the lowest graded season of his career, which was 2024. Pitts played 111 snaps out wide, so that number got more than cut in half. About the same number from the slot, but he was forced to play 365 snaps as an inline wide tight end. That's just not where he thrives.
No,
and so the fact that the Falcons couldn't recognize that you shouldn't do this with him is baffling. And I think that if he ever gets with a coordinator that knows how to use him and essentially make him that big wide receiver, you could see a resurgence. Like, this guy is the perfect reclamation project. He's 24.6 years old. He's going to be 24 during his rookie season, most of his rookie season this year. Like, the guy was young coming out, and he's very intriguing. And so I would be more apt, just as the general outlook of the team, saying, the Steelers, you're not ready to compete for a Super Bowl right now, but maybe in a few years you will be. Maybe you get the quarterback situation right. Then you can build around potentially a guy like Kyle Pitts. So there's more intrigue for me to get that, even though Pitts is coming off an all-time low and Jonnu's coming off an all-time high. The talent gap and the size difference is still enormous between those two players, and I think that Pitts has a lot more left in the tank.
It's a more future-forward idea to go get a Pitts. I will say, this is just a side note. I hope this doesn't happen, honestly, just because it would be scary for everyone in the AFC. He'd make a great Bill.
He would. Yeah, you put him in the Gabe Davis role, and you really get a big, faster guy. Yes.
It'd be really scary, but so don't want to throw that out in the universe. We already have enough problems with the Bills, but just saying that'd be pretty scary.
That would make for an intriguing offense, to say the least.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've talked enough on today's show. We go live every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also check out Josh George's show. He goes live Mondays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you liked our show today, leave us a comment down below. Give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe on YouTube. That'll help us increase our reach, be able to bring you shows more often. Thank you for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on X at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Steel Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube, or ask Alexa to play the Steel Curtain Steelers podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Steel Curtain podcast.